Hi, Emmanuel. What was your first computer? Or Emmanuel, is this pronounced right, actually?
So my mother calls me Emmanuel.
Emmanuel? Is it better?
That's good enough. Don't worry.
Almost like your mother, right?
Yes, exactly.
Very good.
It's a U. It's a U as the. Is it the umlaut U? Which
yes.
Is U and not U. Yeah, there you go.
So Emmanuel or Emmanuel?
No, Emmanuel. Yeah.
Emmanuel. Oh.
Yeah, perfect.
Perfect.
You got it.
Emmanuel. Okay.
But I lived in the US for a little while, and they just told me, and they changed my name to Emmanuel anyway.
Okay.
Like changing my pronunciation, so anything works.
And the cool story is my last name is Bean, and they always ask me, how to pronounce that Bien, Bean, or Bien. And in France, I was invited to a Java user group. I forgot actually the location, but at the airport they recognized my second name Bien, and I didn't have to wait. I was the priority boarding. They were very nice to me. So it really depends. It depends on the country, the pronunciation of my last name. And in Germany, they always ask me, Adam or Adam, and I say I don't care. So really, I don't care. So now the most important question is now, of course, what was your first computer?
Yeah, so I was actually a PC guy from the very beginning. So I had an Amstrad PC 1512, which I had to look it up because I didn't know the history. But this is the first PC computer ever done by Amstrad. The brand is dead now, but so this was the first PC computer, and so my mom was doing accounting, so she was aware of this, microcomputer revolution, but she was no expert by any means. And at some point, I guess they figured out, we need to teach the kids, these computer things. So they went to a shop and say, hey, what can we buy? And they said, well, there's this 2 floppy disk one, and there is one with a hard drive. And they're like, what is the hard drive useful for? And the guy was like, I don't know. So they came up with a 2 floppy one.
Okay.
And then I got started with that, the double floppy Amstrad PC.
So you had load balancing from the beginning, right?
Yeah, kind of. You could actually swap, some of the bigger software, you had several disks to swap. Mm-hmm. I forgot if you could swap from A to B, and then I think you could actually. So that was you could, save a few, half a second each time instead of having to, move the handle, remove the disk, put back the other one. And these were floppy one, the black ones.
The 5-inch, right? Yeah. So the larger ones.
Yes.
Yeah. So you could copy from one floppy to another. This was actually the main use case.
Yep.
Uh-huh. And you remember the CPU actually, because I had also a guest on on the show, and I think was it Intel already? You know it? What is it?
It was let me double check, but I think it was. Yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting because I had an Amstrad, also Amstrad, but it was a ZX Spectrum one. It was nothing to do with a PC. But interesting. So that Amstrad actually.
Yeah, back in the day, there was no standardization. Not everybody was behind Intel and the x86 industry.
So and what was your first thing you did on the computer?
I forgot what the first thing I did, but I can tell you one of the first thing I did was to break it because so I was. There was no graphical interface, right? So we landed on, the DOS prompt. So you had this C something. And I was looking around and created directories. And at some point I see this, annoying dots and dot file. Mm-hmm. And I'm like, this is annoying. I need to remove this file. Mm-hmm. And I do delete, dot. Mm-hmm. And it turned out that I removed the, autoexec.bat and the config.sys file, which for people that know DOS is kind of useful when you restart the computer.
Yes.
And then I realized my mistake and I was frozen. I'm like, if I stop the computer, I'm dead. Mm-hmm. What can I do? And then I went to my dad and, he knew nothing. So he's like, well, just reinstall it. And that's what I did. Mm-hmm. The good news is not having a hard drive. The whole notion of state was, very different. Everything was on floppy for me. So I didn't lose, anything.
So you didn't delete the floppy. You deleted the RAM.
I forgot where it was. I think maybe I had to boot from a floppy.
Yeah, exactly. So, So this was your first, hacking experience, which was quite successful.
Exactly, yeah.
So, and then you start playing, or what you did with the machine?
Yeah. So by the way, another hacking one was, I think there was something called C/PM at the time. I don't know if it was a operating system or just a format standard for like to format the disk. But at some point I was like, first of all, you were reading stuff from magazines and actual books, right? Printed on trees. So I found, and people were like, CPM is much better than DOS and you should go for it. So I was like, all right. And then I forgot if it's install or format the stuff. And then I've got this new OS and I'm like, great. I know nothing, right? Because you had no program, nothing to run on, to run with, right? And I think that was my first realization that program was actually important. That was the core of things. It's not just the computer that was important. That's what inside it and, what you wanted to do with. So that was my second sort of hacking experience.
Wow.
On that front.
Was it the same week or a little bit later?
Let's say the same week, then I can brag, but no. So, by the way, it's an 86. Yeah.
Okay. So how old were you back then?
I suppose I was 7-ish.
Wow.
6, 7. Yeah.
Wow. So they were early days. So that's actually amazing. Cool.
Yeah, I'm from 77. So 84, that's probably where they started to... No, they say 86. So I was 9, sorry.
No problem. Yeah, but still, I mean, a young hacker. Yeah. Very good. And then you started playing or what? What you did with the computer?
I played, but not that much. I think I played those, either black and white or I had 4 colors, but the 4 colors were like cyan, magenta, black and white. And these were just horrible. They would burn your retina.
Yeah.
Nowadays. So I played a while. Yeah, I think I played a while because, I remember at some point my parents were like, oh, you're using the computer too much. And I remember that the computer in the BIOS had something where when you started, it was saying, last started, at that date and that time. And my dad used to use that to find whether I was cheating or not, abusing, playing. Yeah.
Okay.
So I played a lot.
And
then I also explored, BASIC was my first developer experience.
And then now it's become interesting. Why? So why you did it? So you played and usually you have lots of fun, playing games. And then why you started BASIC? How?
I think I was, I don't fully remember that, but, I know right now I'm usually bored with game very quickly. So I like the fun of exploring it, and very quickly it's like, it feels repetitive or a bit too hard for my test because I'm not agile for my thumb. I'm not a millennial by any means.
We all are millennial, we are all young.
Are we? Okay,
yeah, sure.
Okay, let's do that.
Java keeps us young,
Well, I'm definitely Generation X, the one that knew the analogic and the digital.
Yeah.
I think I wanted to have, so to me, I think it started as a game. I wanted to have fun. It wasn't really I had a problem. I wanted to fix it. It was like, I want to explore the thing and build my own stuff and, have fun with it. And because it was, those logic, and I had this, logical, puzzle minded game, my brain, I guess that's how I got, interested in it.
And
so I think I was trying to do the snake, kind of game.
Yeah.
So I think I did this one. Yeah.
Okay. Interesting. So another guy also started with the game. So it's like seems like to be popular start, to be a hacker. So were you still 9 or 11, or how old were you approximately?
Yeah, I would say. Yeah, something more like 11.
Okay, cool.
11, 12. I think it was right before, I don't know if it's the same in Germany, but we got primary school up to 11-ish. And then 12 is where you go to college, which is not the US college. It's more like high school.
Yeah, in Germany it's similar, but I think
schools.
1 year earlier right now. It's like you switch with 10, I think, yeah. And
10?
was still the same machine?
No. It's a good question. No, I think it was a more recent one because I remember the blue one, the hard floppies, where you could drill a hole on the right side of the floppy to make it double density.
Exactly. You know? This was like
playing with fire.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, and so you did a little bit of basic. Did it work, your snake game?
Yeah, it was working.
Hey, cool. So, and what we did then?
I think I didn't do that. So I don't remember anything that I actually built in practice. I remember playing with Pascal. And
but why? I mean, is this like your colleagues wanted to play or just...
Yeah, with my friends. So I was, just like geeks, we had a very selected number of friends we could talk to and have fun with.
But
good. But I guess there was a bit of an emulation of like, hey, we could, write this stuff, what compiler do you use, because back in the days, there was the rage of like one compiler being better or faster than the others. Yeah, that's what I remember.
Okay. So, and Turbo Pascal, you remember something significant when you wrote?
Pascal. I was annoyed not having GoTo for a while because it forces you to structure your thinking more, right? So I don't know how people starting today do it, because for us it was really a gradient. You had like go-to level, orchestration, and then you went into a proper loop and if fully enforced. And then we got introduced to object-oriented programming language, which was, big. It took me a while. It was really difficult for me, this shift. And then it became the aspect-oriented and then functional, which I ignored until the very recent years. So I don't know how people just jump right now and say, okay, you can do object-oriented and functional and like high order, thingy. And I don't know how they do it.
So I think similar to us, but what I also started was GoTo's and Basic, and then the next one was Go Sub, and then the Turbo Pascal. I actually didn't knew that this was a function. I just assumed like GoTo with a label. This was my thinking. Like you can just, instead of using a line number, you can just use the name, and it somehow worked. And then later I got actually the idea how it actually works. But and right now, I think it's different because usually what happens right now, they just, look at JavaScript and browser hack around and learn, in more interactive way, I would assume, most of the youngsters.
Yeah, but I think it was interactive. By the way, I do remember Logo as well.
Yeah, Logo, yeah. And you had the French Logo version or the English?
I suppose the French.
Because I find out there is a French version where, instead of going forward, there's a French name for it, and I had and I wanted to have the English one, but it was not available on my machine, or I couldn't get it, so I stick with Basic.
So in France we're not born with the English language as much as you guys are. So we, the more you stay in the fully French version, the better. I was programming in French,
Basic
for a while. Oh, for sure, yeah. Oh, no, not Basic, no, if was still if, but what I mean is all my variable names and so on were French for quite a while.
Yeah, cool. And and you like programming or not? So was it like, accidental hacking, or you were, the full hacker,
No, I liked it. Though, I was really in love with this, and I got very lucky. So in France, you got these engineering schools, and it's essentially the better your grade, you got a bit of a absolute order of schools, kind of. And I ended up in a school that was doing both electricity, electronics, and computer science. And that was really great for me because really I did love computer just the way I think most of your guests love computers. So that was not a hack on life, just by chance that I really, I could have ended up in chemistry because, I like chemistry as well. But I went straight in computer science and had the, somewhat solid background, which is, small plus. But for me, no, I loved it. But the one thing I remember is, I was, I think it was probably the 90 something, but I was interested into this Linux stuff, right? I think Mandrake was the distribution at the time that I explored. And I people have to remember, like not so long prior to that, we were just fiddling with IRQ settings to optimize our sound card and make sure it boots with the right, combination.
Exactly. So what I had, the Linux distribution was DLD, which stands for Deutsche Linux Distribution, German Linux distribution. And I bought it. It was a nice box, and tried to install. Nothing worked. And what I had to do is I had to open my computer and look up, the chip from the graphic card, use it, I think even recompile the kernel or something, and then I had, a basic user interface. So this was my first, encounter with Linux. The question I have, after Turbo Pascal, was something else you built with Turbo Pascal? What was your first serious application? Not a game, but something else. You remember that?
Well, I remember one. I'm not sure that's the first one, but I can tell you that one. And that was way later because that was with the first version of Java that had swing.
Okay. So you skipped, after Turbo Pascal, you just started with Java, or you had something in between?
No, I did a bit of C. So let me tell you. So the timing is the first Java version that had C, but I had, I knew C existed and I, read a little bit of it, but I never really taught myself C. And then I had this internship and the guy said, "Oh, do you know C++ version 6 or whatever?" And I'm like, I know the previous version. And he's like, "All right, that's the same. Don't worry." And then I rushed after the interview because I got the job, quote unquote. And then I rushed after the interview into a bookshop and had to taught myself C and then C++, right? All in the month prior to starting the job. So my first, work that I did was with something called TIBCO. So we had
messaging, right?
Yes, messaging, and they had a C library, and the company needed some sort of a higher level abstraction. So I've been writing this higher level abstraction, trying to figure out C and C++ and the structures. And essentially by the end of my internship, TIBCO came and said, "Oh, okay, we've got a new version with a much higher level abstraction." So everything I did, they just did better. But, we didn't know. So that was my first, work experience, like working in C and, offering a higher level abstraction around messaging in and out for a system.
And what was your experience? So you like C after knowing Turbo Pascal, or were you shocked, or you liked that? So what?
Yeah, it felt more dirty, really.
Okay.
If I remember, the whole notion of pointers were, well, they're not alien to me right now, but they were really non-trivial for me to figure out. Like the fact that you could really kill yourself so easily by just, casting to another thing and then get going was a bit strange.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Oh, by the way, no, I had earlier experience with at school. So two things. One, I forgot what we had to write, but my teacher had something called discipline checker, C checker, so DCC. And that was C, but like really nice. Like if you made a typo, like one extra space in your indentation, it was not a warning. It was not compiling.
They're like linting, right?
Yes, lint, but enforced.
Yeah. Okay.
So we were writing stuff, and you had to write like perfect, at least perfect according to the rules. Otherwise, the compiler doesn't pass. And I remember we were like 2 people on the project, and I was, we first wrote the thing with the normal compiler, and then started to, remove the errors. And I remember, I worked hard to go from like, 86 to 32 errors. And then I'm like, okay, I need a break. And I went to get a Coke, came back, and the other person I worked with was not really savvy in computer. And then I come back, and then we're back at 120 errors. I'm like, what did you do? It's like, I don't know. I tried to help. It's like, oh my God, what happened? And in the end, Well, yeah. So I didn't know at the time, but we didn't have source control. So everything was lost. I had to refix the issues. I couldn't go back in time.
Yeah.
Which would have been just a non-error, non-problem at the time. Right now, as it was a problem at the time, I had to just crank up and fix the errors again.
But you already mentioned Java. So why you started with Java then? So you just found it on the internet, or why you started with Java?
Okay. Before I tell you that, so this other team, the reason I remember that my C work was with Java, I think it probably is 1.1 or 1.2, which had the Swing version.
1.2.
Okay. Was it very... Maybe that wasn't Swing, actually. Maybe that was AWT. But let me tell you. So they wanted to be a showcase to show how Java is great, and they wanted a super nice UI. So every time they had a button, they replaced it with an image. So I forgot if it's AWT or Swing that allows you to do that.
Swing.
But it turned out...
But who? Was it a company who you worked?
It's the company is named Atos. It's a... what do you call that? It's a service company.
They're a large company, actually. They're in Germany as well, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. But they are like, not ISV. What's the name?
Consultants.
They're a consultant company. Yeah.
And you were consultant. You were a freelancer back then, or what happened with you?
No. I was just I think I was still at school and doing one of the internship they require you to do before you graduate. Yeah. So these guys did a beautiful UI and everything, but the garbage collector wasn't as good as we know it right now. So essentially, they couldn't keep the application up for more than 20 minutes because everything was leaking like there was no tomorrow. And I think at some point, first of all, the garbage collectors became better, and B, I think there was a redesign in the graphic APIs to avoid creating so many objects that they were doing before.
What happened in one point of time with Swing? They replaced, I forgot the Java version, but they replaced how the listeners were managed. So instead having no hard references, they used weak refs. So there were no more leaks with the action listeners.
Oh, I see.
I forgot actually the version, but this happened in one time.
Okay. So that's why I remember Java. And then Java, let me try and remember. Then I went on the dark side, though everybody is friendly nowadays. But I went on the dark side and I started to work on ASP and Microsoft, right? So I don't know, I don't think they are in Germany, but there is essentially an Amazon shop back in the days called Fnac. In France, it's well known for selling discs and books and everything around culture.
Okay.
And they started their website for real, and we were there was a heavy Microsoft shop. Microsoft helped us build that. So we wrote ASP based full e-commerce web shop, and I was responsible for the basket and order processing on the front end side. So I did all of that, ASP. So I learned, I was very happy with VB essentially. I really liked that, model because you could go back, breakpoint, go back in time. That was just awesome. It's still to this day, I miss that even in Java. Sometimes you're like with your debugger and you're up to this level. It's like, damn, I went one level too far, and you have to stop and restart your computer and put the debugging point like one step before. In VB, you could literally go back 1, 2, 3 steps above. That was just great.
Cool. So
it wasn't object oriented, but I just enjoyed that model. And the UI was very easy to do. I did a bunch of the graphical applications as well.
So you actually like the UI, right?
I'm not good at UI, but it was so easy. They had a way to graphically draw your UI, which was, very easy.
Okay.
And Java took quite a while to get something equivalent. I'm not a UI guy anymore, so I don't remember the names of when it became somewhat doable to draw Swing applications from your screen. But
and how long do you stick with the ASP and Microsoft stuff?
I think I stick to that. So from 2000 to essentially when C# came up. So
2003.
I think that would have been 2003. Yeah. 2003, 2004. So at that time, we actually, that team was really understood as being successful, and they wanted to take the team that created the website and reinvigorate the general IT of the company. So at that time, they decided to create an architectural, team, that was supposed to give how stuff should be written, right? And at that time we had to choose, okay, should it be still, since the whole C# was coming, we knew we wouldn't stay with the whole VB style COM model. So we had to choose between C# or Java. So that's how I more seriously explored Java, and C# at the time. By the way, I did the C# POC and Java won. and then we went into deciding whether we wanted an app server or not. Well, we wanted an app server.
Was it still Atos?
No. It was the Fnac.
Fnac. Okay.
So I did Atos just as an internship, but since then I haven't worked in the service industry, in the software service industry. I've been at Fnac or at an actual, editor, JBoss at the time.
And you were a freelancer, or you worked as an employee at Fnac?
No, employee.
Okay.
All the time.
So It is remarkable. So you had C# and Java, and then you were for Java, which is remarkable because you already had experience with Visual Basic, with VB, and yeah. Okay.
We had.
Why you like Java?
I remember. Yeah, so that's a good question. So Microsoft was the big evil guy, right? So even if your company was doing Microsoft, you knew it wasn't really serious, quote unquote, right? When we were doing the whole production of the website, like to deploy the website to those, 24 servers, you had to connect to terminal server and then, graphically click and drop stuff. Mm-hmm. So we knew like it wasn't serious as far as industrializable, right? Except we had a few Linux like the DNS server and stuff like that. So we knew it wasn't really, it was more serious to, the non-Microsoft way. So I think there was a bit of from a technical point of view, there was a bit of a bias to try and go the Java way. And Java was way more mature as an ecosystem and industry-wise, even back then. So the, Apache Tomcat, I think, was a thing already. Spring was not. And everybody was redoing kind of what Spring was doing and also doing their own object relational mapper at the time.
Yes. Tomcat was out because Tomcat was really early, so it was donated at Sun around 2000, I would say. So Tomcat had to be out.
Okay.
Yeah. And what you did then? You used Struts and Tomcat, or what was your?
No, we decided to go for a full app server, and at the time there was BEA, IBM WebSphere, I think version 4. It's between 4 and 5. Mm-hmm. We started with 4 and explored 5 after that, and then Orion.
Orion. So very good. So you used WebSphere?
Funny story. Maybe I shouldn't say that.
But wait a second, because back then I was a huge fan of WebLogic, and WebLogic until I would say the version 10 until the version 8 was really lean and fast. So it was really great experience. Yes. And so I'm really stuck. And WebSphere was always a little bit, I would say, slow. So if you would like, to have a lot of coffee in your project, so you just went for WebSphere, and in the morning you could wait 10 minutes until something happens. But the others, and Orion was very, very fast. It has also nice, user interface, and it was actually built by 2 students.
Wasn't it bought by Oracle?
At the time, it was a Swedish project, as I remember, and it was a small team built Orion, and then was built by Oracle and became the OC4J, I think. Oracle
OC4J.
Yeah.
I don't have lots of memories from Orion, but the
WebSphere.
I think
so
we dissed it very quickly.
Why you became WebSphere fanboy back then?
No, I wasn't a WebSphere fanboy, but we had to explore WebSphere versus WebLogic.
Okay.
And the logic is we wanted to make the best stuff. So our management was like, pick 2 and then compare them and then, make, give us your guest and then we'll make it the choice. Because of course the choice is also money and is also, strategy. Like, Fnac was a big IBM shop. They had AS400s and, strong DB2 presence and so on. So, so after the Java versus .NET POC. So yeah, Microsoft wasn't happy about losing at the time. So that was the first win for us, kind of. And then, I went for the WebSphere POC and my friend was going for the WebLogic POC. And yeah, as you said, he was a bit faster than me. WebSphere was really hard. At some point, IBM said, "Oh, we're going to come to help you." And they said, "Okay, we'll give you an AS400, we'll install the OS, and then we'll install WebSphere, and then you'll play with it." And they brought 5 people total to make that happen, and it just took forever. So installing was complicated as a full stack at the time. And yeah, as you say, WebSphere was super, super slow. To just get anything done. And WebLogic was much leaner. That was really the JBoss of the time, right? It was really the cool kid when you wanted to write an app server. Yeah. Stuff on top of an app server.
And even for these days, so the WebLogic had one library you had to use. It was WebLogic.jar, and you had the library. It was everything there, so it was very, very usable. Also, it was no fiddling, with 500 libraries. So I really liked that. So. Back then, it was big on Corba, so the clients needed the library. So they just copied the WebLogic.jar. And later there was WebLogic, I think, client.jar, which was smaller. And we were set, so it was very reasonable. And so why WebSphere won? I mean, because...
No, WebLogic won.
WebLogic won, okay.
Yes.
Very good. Okay.
So here's the story. There is a more funny story down the line. So we've decided for Java and WebLogic. We're still a big DB2 shop. Okay. We got some Oracle, but we're still a big DB2 shop. And then we start building the recommended company frameworks to start application with, right? So Struts, probably Log4j at the time. Spring wasn't a thing. So, we had a IBM Global Services team that was doing a lot of open source that really mentored me into this open source thing. And they had written their own sort of version of what Spring was doing. It was the time of what was the Excalibur, Pico containers.
Yeah,
there was
exactly.
This big debate around
Avalon,
that.
Apache Avalon. Exactly.
Apache Avalon, yes. So we had, I think the guy was like a contributor to Avalon. So we had that. And then, we looked at, the object relational mapper landscape because we were like, no way we just write JDBC code, by hand. So we look at it and the most famous one is TopLink. So we start with TopLink, which was, pretty good, except you had to have Eclipse to edit your XML file, to describe your associations and so on. And the XML generated was not really human friendly by any means, but it was doing the job. And at some point, TopLink get bought by Oracle. And then our management says, look, guys, there is no way we have WebLogic, BEA, and then Oracle in the middle, and then IBM underneath. And then if we have a support ticket, then it will be bounced between 3 companies. There's just no way. So they told us, find something else. We're like, okay, so you want us to, so we find Hibernate and we explore it. It's like the 2 beta something, beta 1, beta 2. So very early. And the team, and then we come back to the management. It's like, okay, so you prefer we take this like random library of the internet, self-support, than having a fully proper support from Oracle. And they said, yes. It's like, all right. So we went for Hibernate. And that's why I started to learn, Hibernate inside out, because I wanted to be able to support the company on that.
Okay.
So that thanks to Oracle, essentially, I became a Hibernate contributor.
So you have to send a gift to Oracle now.
Yeah, exactly.
Hey, cool. So so you learned Hibernate and then you stick with Hibernate. So you quit then the company and went to Red Hat or what?
Yeah. Hey, before that, let me give you a bit of a tangent on that. So at the time, it was also big on the new way to do stuff. Waterfall was bad, even if everybody was doing it. So it was the unified process thing.
Rational Unified Process, RUP.
Exactly. So we had rational. We did buy. There is a company called Valtech, which was big into this notion of processes and organization, and they taught us the rational unified process, and that's how I came to Eclipse, by the way.
Okay.
Funny enough, because I think the Rational Unified Process Bench, workbench was actually running on Eclipse 1. And Eclipse 1, that was really a V0 version, to be honest. Mm-hmm. It really became good at starting at V2. Mm-hmm. And I was not, the naive 25, 26-year-old person was like, all right, so we're gonna, give them the new technical framework and give them the new way to organize the IT, and everybody will love it and will be, all efficient and optimized and agile. And I don't think agile was the term at the time, but, and then we go at it, and the project was a massive failure, not for the technical reasons, of course, but because people didn't want to change, right? And that was my first very painful experience about the importance of dealing with humans and the slowness of organization to, evolve. And that's, I wish, so it still stick to me. And I think I don't know if you have lots of new young programmers here, but you need to try that and fail. That's, it's very important to get experience as far as also hacking your organization. I think that's probably as useful as, hacking your software. That's the next level of complexity, really.
I mean, in my experiences in every project, I have micro hacks always, because, you have always people who don't think, from my perspective, logical or reasonable. So you always have to apply various hacks, right?
Yeah, exactly. So, and then some people call it politics. So it depends how sensible you are to this. So there is a gradient between hacking to, playing the politics, which is of course considered a bit bad.
Yeah. So don't take everything too serious, and then it's better. So for me, it's of course easier because I'm external freelancer. So everything is fun. I think it's less fun if you are working for a company, but for me, it's just funny. It's, watching and observing what happens inside.
Yeah, though I do remember one. So I can re-merge the branch conversation wise. So I started working on Hibernate, helping in the forum. So I read the documentation. I was the first guy that translated the documentation in French.
Why?
Then
why you did it?
It's a good question. I think I wanted to contribute somehow, and so I would say ego, really, at the core of it, when you think about it. When I started wanting to contribute to open source, wasn't for pure selfishness. It was really, having my name somewhere, helping people. So there was the helping people, which is, what my mom taught me. So that's a good side. But I think there was an ego side to it, like have my name somewhere. Which is not what my mom told me, but
well, no.
Anyways,
you are absolutely right. But why I'm asking, because I was always at the beginning, I was asked by several open source projects to translate something to German, and I never wanted, because if you translate something from English to German, it mostly sounds really funny, especially the enterprise stuff.
It does.
And this was completely stupid. So I always say, okay, remember even the Heritian from NetBeans asked me, and I say, this is completely stupid. I will never do this. And I tell you why. Do you understand a little bit German?
Well, I did German at school.
Yeah.
But
so then I will try, to do. Teacher. So, for instance, if you know in enterprise systems, you have queues. And
yes.
And sometimes the Qs are translated to German, and equivalent is snakes because they are Schlangen. And and if you translate everything, it sounds really, really funny. So what I did for fun, on some of my talks in German, I translated word by word, the whole enterprise J2E patterns to German, and this was the best session ever, because it was like, snakeslessness and the best one is message-driven beans. In German, it's like Nachrichtengetriebene, and beans are like, the Weg beans is like Bohne. And this is like really funny. So this is why I wanted to know why you did it. But I think in French is in France is different. So if you have a French documentation, the project becomes, I think, more successful. Because I remember I was in Java user group somewhere in France, and they used Jonas. It's like Jonas application server. Why this? And the answer was because there was a French documentation.
Yeah. Also, it was driven by French people. So no, Jonas has a longer history because it came from Object Web, which was a consortium where France Telecom at the time, or Orange nowadays, and I think Bull and some other company joined. So it was a very French-driven stuff. Yes, and they had, of course, French documentation because of that. But you're right. So, well, it still sounds funny in French, but the thing is, maybe it's still to this day, but for sure, back in the days, people had a really hard time with English. I'm not even thinking about, listening, somebody speaking in English, but even reading. So the minute you had a French documentation, you had a bump in adoption.
Okay. So I got it.
Easy.
Okay. So and then you translated the entire Hibernate documentation, or you contributed something, right?
Yes.
And what did you then? So you contributed also code, or you stick with Hibernate? So what?
Yeah. So I started. So first of all, my hack life was to make the documentation be reviewed by my mom, which is much better at French and typos than I am.
Hey, cool.
So yeah. So she read that. So that's a funny part.
So she's also a contributor now to Hibernate, right?
I guess so, and I didn't put her name on it, so yeah.
You have to do it afterwards.
Yeah.
Cool.
So, what's the question? So I started with helping a lot on the forum, and then giving a little bit of patch. I don't remember which first patch I gave, but back in the days we had CVS, I suppose, of SourceForge, and there was no notion of pull request or anything. So you were literally sending your diff file as patch on the mailing list. And I remember reviewing this, I don't know, maybe 10 lines of changed, but I reviewing over and over and over, because even if you want an ego deep down, you don't want to look like a fool. So I guess that's also related to the ego. So I reviewed it for 10 times too long in practice and shipped it. And I was eagerly waiting, are they just am I gonna burn in flame, or, for a stupid error and so on. And then I remember Gavin's just saying, hey, cool, it's in, thanks. And I was like, oh, that's it. So then I started to contribute patches on the side. And the first big project I did was when Gavin, when JBoss and Oracle decided to do EJB3, right? So EJB3, Java 5 came with annotations, and then people are like, all right, that's at least on the JBoss side, we knew that would be the future to get rid of all of this XML. We had Doclet back in the days, right? So
Xdoclet, exactly.
Xdoclet, yes. Which was great, by the way. We used it. I used it a lot.
Yeah, and by the way, Xdoclet, if you look, the Xdoclet, not annotations, rather than how it's called, parameters for the Doclet, actually, they are very, very similar to the annotations. I would say the Xdoclet was a great proof of concept for late annotations, right?
I might be wrong, but I think Cedric Boost did Xdoclet, and it was also part of the annotation.
No, the Cedric Boost did the EJB Doclet from WebLogic, and Xdoclet was the open source, and I don't know how they are related, because the EJB Doclet started with BA, and I think Cedric worked for BA, and then in parallel there was a SourceForge project called Xdoclet. And the annotations were a little bit different. And the JBoss IDE, which was plugin for Eclipse, had a really good code completion for Xdoclet back then, what I remember. Cool?
Yeah, I don't remember that part. Cool.
I use it all the time in all my projects, so I have to remember that. And I still know I actually, at EJB I think name or something, that was the syntax, like I did it a lot, at EJB home dot. So that was the syntax, and the annotations looked very similar to that. Yeah. what I wanted to know, which patches you contributed. So you contributed lots of patches. Was it the same area? Was the patch like caching, or what patches were there? Also, which bugs you fixed?
No, I don't fully remember. It wasn't probably the core of Hibernate, which was still is a bit harder to figure out. But people had issues, and I was just proposing fixes or a tiny new feature. So it was really I think. For the wannabe contributors here, just get started. I think it got much better these days with GitHub and so on. But you can start with the peripheral tiny features, because what I like is that nobody cares. You're not in the critical path, and it will make you touch a bit of the code base left and right at the periphery without having necessarily to understand it, by fully up and down. And I find it a good way to learn the project by doing that contribution.
Yeah, exactly. So you stick with Hibernate and contributed more and more, or what's the story behind?
Yeah. So the funny story is that at some point I said, I want to contribute to open source, and Geronimo was just starting. What was the name before that? No, I think Apache Geronimo was starting. And then they said, if you're interested, put your name in this wiki page and, we'll tell you what to do. So I put my name and nobody replied to me. So in parallel, I was, looking at Hibernate, and I contributed on the forum and some of those patches. And then one night I received an email say, hey, congratulations, you got a @hibernate.org email address. And it was like the highlights of my month, because I was like, yeah, awesome. I'm one of them. So the other part is like, if you're doing a open source project, please reward the people that are helping you, from the outside. That's an important aspect to show that you do appreciate the work they are doing.
Yeah.
So that's
I would say in general, you should know always, highlight people who do some work. This is also very important in companies. So what usually happens, developers are working all around the clock and no one says anything. And if something goes south, everyone is angry. And I hate that. So I think the management should really learn that if developers work hard, they need some kind of reward. And this can be not only words, it could be vacations or whatever, This is what I never got, why the companies operate so strangely.
Yeah, but I know, so I lived a bit in the US, and when I came back to France, what I realized is that French specifically only mentioned stuff. I mean, a French engineer would tell you what you can do better. Mm-hmm. It can be implied that things are great already, but it's not said. Therefore, it doesn't exist, right? I don't know. I imagine that the German cultural approach is somewhat similar, where we always strives to be a bit better, and then therefore we explain what's wrong. But you need to balance and explain what's good as well. Yeah, that's important.
Yeah, very good. So the question is, what?
No, that's it. So back to your initial. So these were the patches, and then I went to something more serious. And Gavin was like, "Look, we're redoing EJBs, and I want you to explore how we can write whatever we do in XML, the mapping with annotations." Mm-hmm. And I did essentially two prototypes. One with super heavily nested annotations. Mm-hmm. I came back with that. And then that's another stuff that is frustrating but super useful, is that I came back with that prototype, and that gave Gavin what not to do.
Okay.
So when they started to work on that, and in the expert group, they started to redesign the annotation in a much more flat way. That's why you don't have a at many to one with an at table inside it. No, not many to one, but let's say many to
so
many.
You mean the annotations for JPA annotations, not the stateless EJB annotations, right?
Well, EJB3, that's something we need to remember. We need to remind
both
people. It's like EJB was already EJB2 had persistence.
Yeah, CMP.
And the actual, and BMP. Mm-hmm. And also the component management model, which we still remember as EJB.
Yes.
So when EJB3 came, it had both the JPA part mm-hmm. and the normal component EJB part.
Exactly.
And I think that's after that we split the spec into two.
So, and you were interested in the persistence part, right?
Yes, exactly. So so Gavin came up with a more flat version, like add many to one, add table that we
now you see
we know of.
We have now the proof that JCP make actually stuff simpler. So you started as a with over-complete, over-engineered solution, and then JCP kick in, and everything became simpler, right?
Yeah, and to be honest, for two reasons. One of the reasons Hibernate got created is that is EJB2 persistence, right?
Yeah.
CMP, because that was like nobody wanted to use that. So Gavin started to, work night and days on this stuff instead of doing his day job. And that's what became Hibernate. Of course, TopLink was there, but I'm talking about the, open source thing. So I think I joined the JCP expert group shortly after that. By the way, back in the days, that's how I came from Eclipse to IntelliJ, because Eclipse took a long while to support Java 5 and the annotations.
Exactly.
Because they have a different compiler entirely than Java C. And it took them a while, or they didn't see it as a priority. And that's how I switched to IntelliJ at the time.
Cool.
I worked on, so I joined the JCP to help, since I was essentially writing what was called Hibernate annotations, which was the JPA binding layer, on top of Hibernate. And the entity manager, I worked on it with I think Bill Burke from the, Rest Easy and JBoss, Foundation.
Yeah, Bill Burke was back then a huge Corba guy, actually.
Yes, yeah.
A question: you still were at Fnac, or how the company was?
No, I was still at the yes, exactly.
Okay.
So,
and you got time, company time to participate in JCP and all the stuff, or was it your leisure?
Don't ask, don't tell.
Okay,
was
perfect.
The thing. I was doing a lot of night work.
Okay.
But the forum help was definitely on the daytime as well.
Okay.
So I joined the expert group, and then this is my first, on the phone, talking to English person with various accents, and TLAs, like 3-letter acronyms. And I remember this meeting where I joined, and, they are talking about EJB. And for people that know French, the way you spell, E is E.
Okay.
And J is G.
Okay.
J. So EJB is how you say it in French. EJB.
EJB. Okay.
And then I hear EJB. So I translate in my mind EJB.
Okay.
And I'm like, what is that? I don't understand. So I literally understood nothing from that meeting until later I like, that doesn't make sense. And then it clicked into me. It's like, oh my God, yes, JG.
Yeah.
And then I finally, got it. But on the phone with several people, not the best to get started.
Yeah.
If it's not your native language.
But they knew you from the mailing list, so it was not a huge problem, I think.
What? Gavin, no, they didn't know me. So Gavin, talked to Linda Demichiel, which was the spec lead, and said, hey, we're I think it was at the time where we made the JDO guys join the EJB to work on the persistent side. So
Java Data Object is very similar to, I would say, to Hibernate or JPA, but a little bit more complicated, I would say. They had detachment and attachment models were a little bit more evolved than JPA, right?
Yeah. And also technically they were not only about relational database engines. So there was like no SQL before it.
Yeah.
So some of the JDO guys came in, and to keep a little bit of balance, Gavin proposed that I would join the expert group, which I did. So they didn't know me per se, except I was a Hibernate guy. Yeah.
Cool.
And after that, JBoss hired me. So that's when I shifted from Fnac to JBoss proper.
Okay. That's really interesting because in my mind was you were the, for unknown reason, bin validation guy, and then you were the replacement of Gavin King. So you appeared on conferences and you were the official Hibernate guy. So I always thought, why you're doing Hibernate right now, because I didn't know your background, and you were really deep in the whole, Hibernate and JPA spec. But you did also some Hibernate not Hibernate, Bean validation stuff at the beginning, right?
No, that was after the time we were discussing here. So Bean validation came
later, of course, later. But this is how I saw you at conferences the first time speaking about Bean validation and Hibernate search. You also did a lots of talks, great talks, Hibernate search with JMS replication, I remember.
Yeah.
So we met several times.
I think, I forgot which one came first. I suppose Hibernate validator came before Hibernate search.
I guess so, yeah. But this was very early.
We did the
2005, 2006, what I'm speaking about. So I met you several times. Vienna Enterprise Conference and Java One, and once in France. It was in the south of France. It was also a conference. Okay, and what you did in JBoss? So what was your first task at JBoss?
So that reconnects to something I wanted to say. So first task, so first of all, first day at JBoss. So I quit the Friday. Well, the end the Friday. The Monday is my first day at JBoss, and then I asked for a computer to be, sent to me. So I had received the laptop, and then I start the laptop, and then nothing. So I'm like, all right, well, I guess I'll start working on the Hibernate stuff just the way I was doing it at night. So I work on it Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and finally, Gavin calls me. Oh, sorry, we just, totally forgot. Hey, welcome. And then he made a proper introduction into the company. But for 2 or 3 days, it was like, all right, I guess I'll keep doing my open source stuff.
Okay.
And that's what I did essentially for 75% of my time, just working on the Hibernate side. Though we had a mailing list called the core with essentially all of the company. And that's where we were brainstorming, market, what people need. So it was not limited to persistence, but generally. So you were working on your area, but we're making a contribution, making a dent globally, to address how people should, write application easier.
What I'm wondering, you're always mentioning Gavin King, but you were actually hired by McFlurry, right? Or Gavin was behind?
Gavin was, so JBoss was almost all of his history somewhat positive cash flow. Mm-hmm. So they didn't want to grow too fast and hire too many people and then, go the VC route too early.
Exactly.
So they hired people in the various areas slowly. So, started, the whole core JBoss was hired, quite a bit before, but on the Hibernate side, so they made a bit of a partnership agreement with the Gavin and Christian Bauer at the time, and they said, "Well, let's give us a year and see if we like each other or if we're not." Right? Everybody was like,
"I forgot." So the JBoss they had some partnership with Hibernate. So that was the Hibernate and JBoss were two distinct entities at the beginning, right?
Yeah, there was no real Hibernate entity. I know Gavin and Christian were doing consulting at the time, and the other guys were just, helping.
Yeah, this is what I completely forgot. For me, is now, Hibernate and JBoss and Red Hat the same thing, but they were separate entities.
Yeah, it wasn't. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's a curse of people say, JBoss is controlled by the say Wildfly code base is mostly JBoss people, but it's just because we hired the contributors over and over until we reach a plateau, essentially. So they hired the key person on the Hibernate side. So I was probably fifth on the line. So there was Gavin, Christian, and then Steve Ebersol was working a lot on the core code base.
Who? Steve?
Steve Ebersol.
Okay.
He's still leading Hibernate ORM. He's doing most of the work here.
Yeah. Cool.
Then Max Anderson was doing the Eclipse tooling and the whole reverse engineering, of your database, generating the Hibernate model, stuff like that. So they hired Max, and then they hired me. And the deal was there's too many European in this team, and we need some people in the US because JBoss had this model where as a software engineer, you were doing 75% of your time as software engineer and 25% billable. And it could be consulting, it could be training, it could be support.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And on the other side, the support people worked 75% on support and 25% on coding. I don't know if you guys are starting a company. I find it's a great model because you're still connected to end customers and you see the real pain. It's really really awesome model. It's harder to maintain when the company grows, but
yeah, I think
cool.
this is incredibly important. So what I notice sometimes in my J2E Java E world, that sometimes the container developers have no association with real world projects, and they are really concerned about the quality of the container, and forgot a bit how it is used in real world. So if you at least you see some support issues, or if you deliver some training, so you're exposed to the clients and the clients can ask you questions. So I think this is actually a really good model.
Yeah, I agree.
Perfect.
This is a bit of a peek in the deep future, but Quarkus, that's what we wanted. We wanted we have people that keep an eye on the holistic experience, because sometimes you're just going to optimize the CDI implementation, but it doesn't mean it's helping.
No one knows at this time point what Quarkus actually is. So we have, to now to evolve until the road to Quarkus. So you did the Hibernate stuff, and probably those were around 2006, 2007 already, right?
Which Hibernate stuff?
So what?
Yeah, so I joined JBoss in 2005, I think.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So it was Java 5. So
Hibernate stuff, until I got tired of the whole. I'm sick of JPA, and then that's why Hibernate Validator got created. That's why the whole Hibernate search got created, by just saying, look, I'm just tired of that. I'm doing a bit of a burnout, and what was really cool.
You created the validator. You were the initiator of bean validation.
Yeah, so Gavin wrote a 2-day prototype, and then I took over.
Okay, so Gavin had the idea. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. No, actually, he stole it from somebody. I forgot who. Somebody else had that ideas a bit before us.
Okay.
We just copied that from somewhere else. Sorry for the lack of attribution.
No problem. So now we attributed this. Now it's solved, right? Okay. And so bean validation, then you did the bean validation stuff, and you were the spec lead, as I remember. So I attended a lot of Java 1 session. Just listen what you have to say about bean validation. Hibernate search was actually incredibly successful, I have to say. So in all project, everyone asked me about Hibernate search. So I actually also used Hibernate search several times and worked well. And I remember your talks were also interesting with the GMS synchronization and indexing. So it was always fun.
Yeah. Always. It's not a retrofit, but sometimes you start with an idea, and then I spend a lot of time thinking about, why. I love when my talks are like, what's the context? What's the problem? And here is why we created that solution that way, right? So the way you describe this on the Hibernate search. So for people who don't know, it's essentially synchronizes the change you do via Hibernate to your database with a Lucene index and no Elasticsearch index. Because that's one of the part that is a bit hard. So either you reindex on the fly every now and then your database, or you have a bit of an event system telling something has changed, and then please update the change.
Yeah. And in one project this was actually a startup. So we use the Hibernate search to have full text search for the fields, and we use some. You have to use those particular annotations for the index and configure which algorithm you would like to have, more or less, Elasticsearch algorithm, and it worked out of the box.
Yeah, the analyzers.
Yeah,
that's how you split a string into keywords.
Exactly, but And Hibernate search is still keeps the name Hibernate search, or is this part of OGM now?
No, it's still Hibernate search.
Still the name. Okay, Hibernate search. Okay.
Yes. Yeah, and that's how the next gen of Hibernate people. So, the first gen of Hibernate people were like, Gavin and Christian. And then the second gen was like me, Steve, Max. And then you got a third generation with, Hardy and Sane that came because of Validator and search, because Hibernate ORM becoming a bit, it's a fairly mature project even back at the time, and therefore contributing is a bit hard on those super mature projects.
Yes.
So, having those fresh projects, satellite projects also helps to, pique the interest of other people and also addressing problems. So that's a good part.
So marketing.
Evangelization, which is even worse of a name, right?
Yeah, exactly. And but then you also did a little bit OGM work, right? Object grid mapping with Hibernate.
That was later. So it came from Google came up with Google App Engine, and they wanted a persistence layer to their, was it big table, I guess,
exactly.
layer. And they said, look, can we make a Hibernate talk to non-relational databases? And we were like, it's really deeply ingrained in the logic of the library. So no, we don't think so. So that's why they went for the JDO implementation. Sorry, I'm blanking on the name. It's at Apache, I think.
I know what you mean. There's the
nucleus, data nucleus.
Data nucleus, exactly. There's different adapters. Data nucleus, different adapters for persistence. Datanucleus.org, JDO JPA persistence layer, exactly.
Yeah. But then, we kept talking to the Google guys, but at the back of the mind, it was like, damn, is it really impossible? And then, I reset it probably was one of those times where I got tired of, maybe Hibernate search or the bin validation work. I wrote a book on Hibernate search, which was great. I recommend book-driven development. It's actually much better than, conference-driven developments, but it addresses the same model where you're thinking about the use case because you're explaining stuff and you're showing how you use the API. So it's exactly to your point where you say sometimes they had this new thing, but you don't know why or how to use it. That's because people forget to say, okay, how would it be used in real life? And so we had changed a little bit the API while I was writing the book to just so I could explain why we were having that API and so on. But, I know you've written quite a few books, but for me, it was a pretty traumatic experience. It's a lot of work.
Yeah. For me, it was different. So what happens in my case, I do some projects. Then I think, okay, what can be improved? And what I usually do, I open source some of the stuff. So I rewrite it completely from scratch and make it better. And then I write a small application first, and then I explain it usually in a book. So something like this. So this is done faster. So this is really, you can write really fast if you do this. But I always did it, in planes and trains, and now I don't travel too much. So the last few years I didn't write any books. This is the only reason, because I spent all my time in coding or, different stuff. Okay, so interesting. So you were tired, and then OGM started. So you also started OGM, or was it Gavin?
Yeah, I started OGM.
Cool.
And the idea was, okay, is it, so let's reset the assumption. Like, the idiom, I didn't know it was impossible, therefore I did it.
Yeah.
Kind of model. So that's what I artificially said, what if it's not impossible? And then I started to hack. It was really a hack, but, essentially fork some pieces of ORM and rework some parts and use otherwise the engine. And that's how we got, so OGM, the name comes from Object Grid Mapper, because the use case we had was, InfiniSpan is a key value store, distributed, lots of value, but very quickly customers want a bit of an abstraction, like an object layer on top of it. And, we felt we could do an object grid mapper that would, essentially address even associations and stuff like that and do the right mapping for people. And then when I worked on that, I realized, I've written a bit of an abstraction engine over the backend source structure. So you could have dialects that could talk to other structures like document-based, backends or graph-oriented databases and so on and so on. So that's how we expanded the OGM, support for Mongo and then Neo4j and so on. And the idea was to say, let's let's try and see how would you map this object and this association in a native way if you were to persist it into this graph database or this document database and so on. So that was the exploration on the OGM side.
Exactly. So sometimes it works and sometimes doesn't, right? I mean, the mapping always works, but sometimes I don't need Java objects for persistence. So if I have, for instance, Elastic and JavaScript frontend, JSON-P would be nice because I just pass JSON object back and forth. But if you have more business logic, then the JSON-B or like proper Java classes are better or more suitable.
Yeah. And to be fair, we had less success than I hoped on the OGM side. And I think it really comes to what you're saying. I think as part of those NoSQL usage, there is a strong distinction between, okay, that's simple enough. And I just get this, 5, 10 entity model dealt with, and 10 might be at the fairly high end. And then I just get going. And then the other more complex case is really a subset. So unlike JPA and ORMs, ORMs got helped not only because for two reasons. People do create very complex relational structures in RDBMSs. So the model is more naturally much more very complex. The other aspect is that JDBC as a API is very verbose and annoying to use. So there was two reasons why, ORM became very popular, I think, in the Java landscape.
Yeah.
This is less the case in the, no ORM universe, because at least they didn't make the JDBC mistake.
Yeah.
Right. And if you keep your model somewhat simple, so I guess a graph database would be different because they do have inherently complex structures. That's the whole point. But, for document and key value store, even worse, it's a much, much simpler model.
And then you get bored with OGM?
No, what happened? No, so then I go more into the architect type, because what we realize is, by the way, at that, very early on, like a year after I joined JBoss, essentially Red Hat acquires us. So we become Red Hat. But what we realized is that
was it any difference for you? So JBoss time and Red Hat time. So any difference except, different t-shirt?
Yes, it's very different, for a few reasons. So first of all, the engineering remained mainly intact. So that was a feat of Sacha Labouret at the time that, took over when, Mark just left, Mark Fleury. And he really kept the team, happy and in the same approach and so on. But there is a few things that changed in the Red Hat when we joined Red Hat. Is you go from a 200 company where you feel you're making a change by every contribution you make into, at the time, I think a 2000-ish company where it's less obvious, right? So it's the whole startup big company problem that some people never manage to adjust to. That can just kill the motivation for quite a few people.
Yeah, but this is just your perception. From the outside, it looked like, nothing changed. So I was still excited about new Whitefly.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay, cool.
New Whitefly releases and the Red Hat, as I have to say it now, but if I switch, to the JBoss or Red Hat stuff, so I didn't even know what they are talking about, like JBoss Enterprise middleware or whatever. I was like, okay, I don't know what it is. And then just switch, to the back org stuff. And then I knew, and if my clients wanted to have support, they got the support, afterwards. So this was the model, and it worked well.
Yeah.
So this is why the question. So I have to say, all the contributions are as visible as always, even probably more, because then now you have like a screencast, Red Hat screencast and different stuff, which was not that popular before, I would say.
Yeah, Red Hat, it took them a while, but they realized developer is really important. It's less important in the operating system level, right? The sales process is very different. It's essentially selling boxes, right? I'm oversimplifying, of course, but selling an operating system is just like, oh, by the way, we are going in production next week. So can we get more? Sure. Go ahead. For middleware, this is deeply entrenched into the project, startup decision making on the stack, and you go in production way later. We're more agile, hopefully nowadays, but a year, 18 months later is not uncommon.
Exactly.
So the sales cycle is very different, and it took them a while to realize. And then at the same time, the notion of the developer is king was growing, as in they are the decision maker. So you say, the developer just get the blame, but I think this is changing to. I'm seeing it in France. The developer have, a much more say into things, and up to the point where we as developer have to have a bit of an ethic, right? Don't get the latest flashy thing, if it puts your company in jeopardy, right? Yeah. If you leave or, stuff just dies and whatnot.
Yeah, exactly. So, okay. So, then what happened? So OGM, Red Hat acquired JBoss?
Yeah, so Red Hat acquires JBoss, but that's back in the JP, right after the whole JPA being written. So bin validation, all of that is under Red Hat. Bin validation, OGM, Hibernate search, I think, is also under Red Hat. That's probably the 2006 to 8 timing. I work. Hold on. What did I do? Yeah. So what we realized is that we've got a bunch of unrelated communities.
So, and you were the architect, you said. At Red Hat, you became the architect.
So that's why we start to somewhat create architects, because we've got the InfiniSpan team doing their stuff. JBoss Cache was the name prior, and then InfiniSpan. Then we've got Hibernate doing their stuff. We've got Vertex doing their stuff and whatnot, right? And there is Java EE that is giving us a bit of a consistency to some extent, but generally speaking, this is just a bunch of community, and Red Hat taps that community work and make a Uber product out of it. But what we realized is that there is so much you can do by being somewhat disassociated like that, and we wanted to have, not a top-down approach, but more like have people a bit stepping away and thinking about, but what do we want to do globally, right? Here is the problem. How do we address it? And what changes has to be done in the 3, 4, 5, 6 different communities? And that required some people to step a bit away from the day-to-day work of their local community and think a bit more globally. So I became a little bit of that. But that didn't stop me for, helping the InfiniSpan side. I worked a bit. I'm not sure I contributed a lot, but I on design wise, I was, somewhat involved on that. I don't think I coded a single line of Debezium, but I influenced, a lot of the design. So Debezium got, started at Red Hat by, Randall Osh, and then, got taken over by, Gunnar Morling. And Debezium, for people who don't know, is the change data capture system. So they listen to the database log and create change events of it, which means then you can plug and put that in Kafka. And then you can plug listeners to those list of events and replay the history of your state to compute all the states based off that original state. So it opens a lot of possibility in the event-driven architecture model and, many other use cases. So I was still everything data at Red Hat, I was pushing for. So, and you see OGM was here initially for InfiniSpan. So you see, we're trying to do stuff that makes sense for us as a bigger picture, but it also helps the community. So that's how I spend some of my time.
Okay.
And then Quarkus.
Okay.
I think that,
yeah.
I guess that's
so as architect, so you had also to use PowerPoint?
So as architect, I first used Google Doc.
Okay, very good. So this was the longest thinking phase, in this podcast episode. This question.
No, because I'm like, my initial thinking was like, of course not. And then, well, I actually did present a lot internally. So, and then I was trying to think, well, what came first, right? So yes, as architect, you take a step back, talk to people more, and And then once I figured stuff out enough, I wrote down what we call the data strategy for us. And I'm happy to report that, it's been like 3 years. And so far what's in that document doesn't have to change a lot. Yeah. I mean, Kubernetes has changed some names and so on, but the move towards, where we're going with service, oriented middleware, is really there. So that vision took a little bit to aggregate in my mind and then propagate and write down in a document, but then it's stable and people can refer to it to be consistent in how they work, right? And then, of course, yes, I had to create Google Drive, Google presentation stuff to show it to people. But that's more the product building aspect. So that's more of an internal sausage.
No, I was just curious about your reaction, So,
yeah.
So cool. And so you already mentioned Quarkus. So afterwards, Quarkus happened.
Yeah. So in parallel to that, so of course I'm not, I didn't realize it would be so centric on me, that podcast. So,
yeah, it always is.
That's a bit uncomfortable. Well, I didn't know. I actually haven't listened to an episode of your podcast.
So there was one episode about Debezium already. Debezium with Gunnar.
Debezium.
Yeah. Okay. No problem. Because, what's also interesting is the whole history, because in lots of projects, people ask me why Java EE and why it was so complicated. And the answer is what you already said. It was not possible before to do it without Java 5, for instance, right? There were no annotations before Java 5, so we had to use XML, period. And this is interesting. But after your last PowerPoint presentation, you got bored with Google Docs, and then you started something else. And what happened afterwards as an architect?
Something failed. I won't go into the internal stage again. But yeah, I'm like, so first of all, I did it for the greater cause. Like I believed in the strategy. I do believe in the strategy and so on. But I like to code, right? Just like you. So it gets very frustrating, and because the goal is more like a 3-year, 5-year plan, and you don't see the results, very fast, right? And when you fail slow. So that sucks. So that was hitching. And then in parallel to that, I wasn't so much involved, but there's been a lot of performance work that has been done by the middleware team, for example, Hibernate, let's make it faster inside Wildfly, on, industry benchmarks, SpecJs and whatnot. So that creates a lot of optimization where we look at how applications run and what to optimize and so on. And the idea was throughput, right? Throughput.
Yes.
Let's get the most out of the machine. And that's how you score very high on SpecJ. And then something happened, containers, where the idea is, well, the way you scale is you take the one instance and you make 10 of them, and that's how you scale. So the throughput per process is actually not that useful anymore, less useful, let's say. So stuff like Ruby that, could have a less of a throughput, are back in the game because it's much easier to create a cluster of that application by adding, many processes, in an orchestrated fashion, declarative orchestrated fashion. And Java then becomes, at a disadvantage, because Java was designed for throughput, like one process cranking up as much requests per second as possible. They wanted to beat C, right? I think James Gosling would want it to be faster than C. And when it became the server side, model, that was the same, just an extension of that. And to do that, they had to trade, it's always trade-offs. So they traded a little bit of CPU, but to be honest, I think Java is pretty good on the CPU side, but it's a bit slow to start, because they keep a lot of information. And they traded CPU and they traded memory to be super efficient at throughput. And when you look at a container, you don't want to pay a high memory and startup time to be, in the end, super efficient throughput wise. You'd rather start fast and then add more containers the more you need, right? So Java is like, hey, I come with this well, Hello World is a special case, but I come with this, 250 RSS resident set size memory usage and to do your simple Hello World REST, application. And people are like, well, I do that with 10 times 10 times less memory in this other platform. So, goodbye. So we've been trying to optimize that and figure out what's wrong, right? What's going on. So we have the OpenJDK team, we've got the middleware team, and at JBoss and then at Red Hat, we yell at each other all the time, right? It's more like frank conversations than just being politically correct and, protecting and so on. Of course, we try to be more inclusive. There is this general inclusive trend that, has changed that a lot. But essentially, it's always honest conversation about what's going on. So middleware is like, look, we consume a lot of memory, and it's not so much the memory of the application itself. It's all in the meta space. It's all the classes and so on. So we go to the OpenJDK team and say, you guys use too much memory. And the OpenJDK team is like, you guys use too much classes. It's like, well, okay, fair enough. But so we try to optimize, and we optimize the middleware to be more container friendly, not only in usage and patterns. A lot of things are no longer useful. The notion of a cluster management that in an app server is less useful in a Kubernetes universe because Kubernetes is your, cluster management.
And what do you optimize? You optimize the whitefly, like, you just introduce a standalone mode, or what was the optimization in particular? So what product you optimized?
Yeah, so whitefly was always the flagship, because the advantage of that is all of the components it's the trickle down effect. If you want to optimize whitefly, you have to optimize Hibernate and, Narayana, the transaction manager, and the JCA connector.
So this was the aggregation point.
Yeah, exactly. It's just, it's the Fedora of JBoss.
Okay, cool.
It's the upstream, really.
And you were behind the optimization, or everyone? So was it your job?
No, I was not. I know of that. Sane, for example, is much more of that kind of guy. I'm not into Sane Genovero he took over search, Hibernate search, and he's really the current lead of the Hibernate team. Organizing, where we go on the validator and search and so on. Yeah.
You all yelled at each other. You were a little bit more inclusive, but
so we improve stuff, but it's really incremental and it's not like a breakthrough. So we know we have to change stuff in a somewhat radical fashion, and the end. I don't know if it was clear in our mind, but the end result is like metaspace is too high in the Java ecosystem. So I do not want to blame OpenJDK, because this is the Java ecosystem problem. What's happening is that OpenJDK, because of the Java language specification, Java is actually a dynamic language, or the platform, whether we like it or not. So they have to keep around a massive amount of meta information to be able to literally change the code on the fly. So of course they have the just-in-time compiler. So that means they need to keep track of which part is used a lot in your classes, which part has to be then compiled a bit better, compiled massively better, the C1, C2 level of the compiler. So they need to keep those statistics around. They need to keep what has been compiled, which is usually in memory, what has not been compiled, and keep the interpreter around. So all of that class structure is stored in the meta space, and it's useful. You cannot say, well, I'll disable it because I don't need it. In practice, you do, because the Java ecosystem is abusing the dynamic aspects of Java. We start, Hibernate starts, read an XML file, do reflection left and right, do class path scanning. All of that is dynamic, right? So you cannot really optimize the JVM to say, that's just the one way, and then let's get rid of the extra load. Same for Spring. I think same for everything. That's really an ecosystem thing. That's why I'm saying that's the blame. So we feel that something has to change here, fully consciously or not. And then ahead of time compilation happens for real. So the ahead of time compilation is the idea of taking your Java application and not do interpreted and then just-in-time compile, but compile everything, from the get-go. And there were quite a few stuff going on. There is something called Elixir, I think. Something ElixJet or something like that, which was this ahead of time compiled VM. There is GC4J or GCJ, sorry, which somebody in the OpenJDK team at Red Hat, was the leader, is the leader of. But none of them really caught up. And then,
by the way,
Oracle,
have you heard about Maxwell?
Maxwell?
Yes. So
no,
actually,
except as a CPU, I haven't.
It was the attempt. There was Sun Microsystems still around, and they tried to build the JVM in Java itself, and in order to optimize that, and it was Project Maxwell. And I thought I have wrote a blog post about that. I don't know, 10 years ago, and I still found the reference, but it was broken link. But this is how they started, to try to have. I think this was the start of the GraalVM.
Yeah, because because the biggest piece so GraalVM is it's a complicated right now. It's just an umbrella for a lot of technologies.
We should skip,
but the core of it.
We should skip the GraalVM, otherwise we don't get to Quarkus. So
okay, all right. So but just quickly, so Graal, the compiler, is really the compiler written in Java. So at least out of Maxwell, at least that survived, I suppose.
Yeah, cool.
Right.
And
so we see. Yeah, sorry, go ahead.
No. What I understand is, so you saw the startup time has to be improved, and there's lots of reflection and dynamic stuff is going on. This was the observation, and who was behind it?
But not quite. So
who was behind
the
in Red Hat behind the whole movement? Was it like all the communities find it out, or was it like someone was behind? So who was the driving force?
We know. So two things. So, everybody knew that, people using the app server, instead of going things like the Spring Boot way was really on the down curve, right? So we're like, okay, we need to think about something else. And, in very open source fashion, we tried quite a few things, right? We have Vertex, which is a pure reactive way to do applications. We had Wildfly Swarm, which was like a, Wildfly doesn't start you, you start Wildfly model, which got renamed Thorntail. Then we got MicroProfile, which tries to make a smaller set of, whatever would be needed, compared to Jakarta EE. So these are explorations to try and make stuff smaller and more aligned to how people want to write applications, whether microservice or not so microservice, but, in the new era. And so that's really built on top of all of that effort. And then we see GraalVM, Substrate VM really. And then we do a bit of an experiment. Like, can we make, what is great about GraalVM is so by the way, it's not startup time we wanted to optimize. It's memory usage, because it's really the cost that is hitting you and makes you uncompetitive in the whole container approach. If you want 10 times your application, if you have a big high level memory cost, that's killing you. So that's what we wanted to optimize. And they had really great number for that, but also great limitations, which is no reflection unless you give us the list of classes you want to do reflection on. Same for proxies. I think that's the biggest one if we want to move on to Quarkus. So we're like, can we take our libraries and make them do all of that reflection stuff, not at runtime, because then you would not optimize towards, Substrate VM as much as you should, but at build time. And that's the shift and the exploration we started with. And I started that with, Jason Green, which was the lead of Wildfly, and which he gave to Brian Stransbury now, and Bug McWhirter, the serial open source, entrepreneur. He did Druze, Codehouse, quite a few things around. He likes to start projects.
So you were at the exploration from the beginning?
Yeah.
Okay, cool.
Well, what is the beginning, right? You're always based on something else, right? But yes, the beginning of the project proper, yes.
Yeah, of the first commit to a common repository, something like this, right? Just how.
Well, the funny thing is that we did a bit of like, really drafty POC, and then we take a bigger team of 5-6 people, and we say, okay, we need to get started. And then there's lots of discussion like how we should design it this way, that way. And then at some point, somebody go in a pub and write the first actual lines of code of what becomes Quarkus. And it said, all right, I know you guys talk, but here is my first version. And we're like, all right, let's stop talking and let's keep improving this stuff. So that's why the first lines of code of Quarkus got started in a pub.
So called,
Australia.
Pub Factor,
Pub Factor, yeah.
Very good.
The first internal name was the name of the pub, really.
Oh, really? Really?
Yeah. Well, we had the name of the initiative and the name of the framework to do that.
So what was the project
Shamrock
name? Can you reveal that, or is it secret? So what was the secret name?
So Shamrock was I think you might see it in the early history of the Git repo. So Shamrock was the name of the framework that is now known as Quarkus. And the initiative was named Protean. Except Protean is the name of a company in England doing software, so we couldn't keep that name.
And the pub name, what was it? Protean, was it a pub name?
Shamrock.
Shamrock was the pub.
No, Shamrock.
Okay.
Yeah. I believe it could be offensive for Irish people and so on. I haven't looked it up, but anyway.
No. So we won't cut it out, but this is just no secret name.
No.
So perfect.
Exactly.
So okay, and when
so we start and we had this. So our CTO says, okay, you got 3 months, come back with, good results. And we said, okay, we want the minimum viable thing. So we want CDI, we want some persistence, and we want REST, right? So we take REST easy, try to make the work, like do stuff at build time. We look at CDI and our weld implementation, and we realize quickly that we have to rewrite it to do build time work instead of lots of reflection and runtime work. And we're like, okay, we need persistence. And I was like, Hibernate is going to be hard, but let's try and give it a try. And I was sort of pushing for it, where Jason was like, are you sure? It looks like a risk and so on. But we tried, and we had to also fix the JDBC drivers because they were not working on Graal VM. So we explored that. We worked. We had to cut a lot of features and things. But in the end, we've got the, CDI, REST endpoint, talking to a database via Hibernate, and it's running and it's showing the numbers we wanted, which was being in the ballpark of a Go application doing the same.
Yeah. When was the pub event, roughly? So Quarkus was released.
The pub event is like June
last year.
Last year.
And
2018.
Okay, cool. And you are still located in France, or were you somewhere else?
Yeah, I'm in France.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
And the pub was in France?
No, the pub was in Australia. So at the time, I was exploring the Hibernate side. So I was helping Sane. We were hacking on that aspect of things, while they were working on the core of things, which was let's do stuff at build time.
Okay. So now we covered exactly the road to Quarkus, and now I gave you my point of view, my feedback. So so as you probably know, I really like Whitefly. So I was a little bit not concerned, but I really never got the idea why Whitefly gets the microprocessor port so late. And I was at the Code one last year, and there were some people from Tonetail and Swarm and asked me, about my opinion about Tonetail and on the stuff. And I say, I have to say, I don't even know a use case. I mean, Whitefly is small enough, and the Tonetail is not like way smaller. And the fiddling with all the dependencies, I wouldn't use it in a project. And they never said nothing and walk away. Is okay. And then and then Quarkus was on the.
So when was that?
It was Code One. What was it? September last year.
Okay, and who was that? Was it Ken Finnegan?
I think so. Ken and the other. So usual suspects. And they attended my session, microservices, where I did Whitefly, and then they asked me. I was not rude, but I say, okay, I can tell you, I have no idea, why the whole Swarm thing is useful, and I never use it in a project, and I cannot tell you, what use cases does it solve, and Whitefly is small enough. And they say, yeah, okay, but I had no time, so there are no time for politics. After the talk, I had 10 minutes, and they asked me about my opinion about microservices and Whitefly, and always gave the same opinion to John Klingen and the others, actually. Because in my project, this is the memory. It was not that not that problematic. What I saw, of course, the marketing need that we need something smaller. But what many people or developers forget, how performant one single server can actually get, the use case that you have start, runtimes properly. The use cases for cloud vendors or for Netflix, Google, or Facebook, but most of my clients don't have such problems. But regardless. And then I saw Quarkus, and I say, okay, probably another iteration of, Whitefly Swarm or whatever the name right now is. And I gave it a shot. Mm-hmm. What I didn't like at the very beginning is, the Quarkus :dev. I was like, what the hell? I need a specific plugin. So what I did, I deactivated everything. And this was, I created actually a screencast then later. And they say, okay, it still works. So, okay, good news. No magic. You can also use it as a regular stuff. Then I took a look at the fat jar, or however it's called, and I say the fat jar is too big for a thin war and too small for a fat jar. And I noticed that there is the manifest MF with references to the lib. And I say, this is actually really interesting. And for me, this is why I ask you so many questions was, I thought what happened was some Whitefly engineers noticed that if you ship, for instance, Whitefly to the cloud, let's say, then if you ship it to the cloud, this deployment model doesn't make any sense because what I have for years in my project is we have one application server and one war, and this is one unit, right? And if you ship the Whitefly to the cloud, you have to ship, the XML parsers and the deployments and the scanners. And then, of course, the attack surface is larger and, everything is bigger and slower. So what you could do, you could, of course, read at the build time everything and, and ship just what you need to production. This is what I thought is the strategy. And I thought about this, and this is genius. I'm saying, this is really genius idea because this is like, a true evolution of Java EE. So it's the same programming model, but a way improved experience. And then I have to tell you, the Quarkus is the first times for years where I see something with a huge added value. Because if you kick in the Graal, this is like 80% savings or something like this, but you don't have to. This is the great news. And you can also, port your regular Whitefly applications to Quarkus if you like. But if you don't, you can stick with Whitefly. And this is why this was interesting that you came from complete different direction over, the metaspace and reflection. And my thinking was someone came up with the idea with Quarkus because they noticed that deployment, the dynamic deployment of wars at startup of the application server doesn't make any sense.
Right, exactly. It's the container immutable container, and then dynamic deployment of war is like, okay,
yeah,
that's it doesn't fit.
Yeah, no more necessary for one-to-one relation. In shared deployment, of course, because you ship the container once, the server once, and you deploy multiple wars, which technically cannot happen anymore because everything is packaged in a Docker container.
Right.
Yeah. And
but by the way, what's your so Spring Boot is popular, of course, and that's the opt-in model, right? Where you build from your main application whatever you want. So for you, it still doesn't make sense, even though it's popular.
I have to so it doesn't make sense. It makes sense because it's popular, but I don't get it. Also, I have to say, fat jars und Überjar, I have no idea why it's useful because it doesn't make any sense. If you push, for instance, fat jar to the cloud, usually only a few kilobytes of your business logic change, and you have to rebuild the whole thing. Because for me, it doesn't make sense at all.
So that's why we have the lib, by the way. So that innovation comes at least from Thorntail, but probably was invented elsewhere. I don't know. But
Hollow jar.
Yes. Hollow jar, yeah, maybe.
This is the Thorntail way. The Thorntail way, to separate the Thorntail from the war. So there was like the split, the Thorntail from the deployment. Yeah.
Yeah, and the key is it's coming from how Docker layers things, right? So you could define a layer that is not changing, which is your Thorntail layer or the Quarkus layer.
And this is how I use.
You change the business logic.
And this is how I used Java EE for years, cloud native, because we pushed Whitefly once. To the private Docker registry, whatever cloud, and we just push our thin wars all the time. And Quarkus is the first framework I know which is absolutely compatible with my idea. So, and this is why it's true cloud native, because you separate the lib layer, and an optimization would be if you just deliver one jar in the lib and not know all the distinct modules. Just have one lib would be even better. You know what I mean? Because in the Quarkus lib, you have all the Whitefly libraries, prepared Whitefly libraries. It'd be nicer if you had just had one library, but this is just a small thing. And as I have to say, it is a genius project, and I'm really optimistic with it. And the feedback from community is also great. So yesterday I was Java user group Nürnberg, so I'm back today night or morning. And the one guy from Red Hat did Quarkus, and afterwards I did Java EE microprofile and a little bit Quarkus. And the crowd, the audience, they really like Quarkus. So they were well prepared, asked good questions. Everyone was positive. So I have to say, a really great work. And what I really like at Quarkus, I also asked I had a chat with John Klingen about that. It looks like for me, a very usable product. So for instance, list extensions, you get all the extensions you can use. Then you can, so it's very well documented, but this is, the documentation is lean and you can immediately use it. So this is reminds me a little bit, the Rails mindset 10 years ago. So it's batteries included, everything is inside, very easy to use. You can use Visual Studio Code, fire it up and just go for it.
Yeah. So our inspiration is, one of the strong inspiration is Play 1.
Okay.
Which got it from Rails, right? Which got it from whatever.
Yeah.
But the Play 1 had lots of good ideas. It was, very centered around the global experience. They had, what becomes Hibernate with Panache is, got a lot of ideas from Play. They had this notion of, dev mode where you could change stuff and it would be redeployed. So we made it happen too. That was a good, strong inspiration from Play and therefore Ruby on Rails. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Cool. So, Emmanuel, do you have any questions?
Yeah. Do I have any questions? Yeah, I do. So it's funny because to me, we have to show Quarkus awesome memory use. Oh, no, two things. If it's question, then just one thing. So, we have to come at it from less memory is great and so on and so on. But to me, the real strong immediate value for a developer is the live reload mode, the development mode, where you develop and you go back to your IDE, you refresh, and it's, you don't have to repackage, redeploy your app. It's just right there. So I haven't seen you mention that. So I wonder, is just, you are not that interested into it, or what's your feedback on that?
The Quarkus.dev is really useful and I use it, but I'm at the beginning, I'm not interested in any magic, I don't like to be dependent on something too much. So I was really curious how it works behind the scenes. So I think at the beginning, you should show, Maven clean install that the Quarkus runner is created, and then Quarkus dev mode. So then everything is clear that it's just optional. The Quarkus dev is not mandatory thing. And the problem with me is I use Whitefly in application service for a long time. So I have scripts, for instance. I'm able to install Whitefly with a script, so which downloads Whitefly, deletes the old one, unzips the new one. Then I have a small tool called WhatSH. What it does, it's very similar to Quarkus. It was created actually before Quarkus. It watches my Java files, and on every change, it deploys this to any server I like. So a similar experience, so it's fast enough.
Oh, I see.
But I prefer Quarkus for prototyping because it's even faster. And the problem with my stuff is I use Maven archetypes, and Maven archetypes work great if the internet connection is good. So sometimes it's flaky, and if it's slow connection, it takes forever until my archetype checks whether there's new version in the internet, even in offline mode. And your Quarkus plugin is not an archetype, so it was also genius. So I will steal the idea probably, because you just say Quarkus.:create and it happens immediately. And then I can skip, the reinstallation of the application server, so it's even faster for prototyping for me. What I don't like a lot, because I know my project, it's not like one project goes to production with CDI or just JAX-ORS. I know for sure I will use almost everything. So I created a Quarky, my own archetype, which just adds all extensions from the beginning. So I use Quarky, which is on GitHub. And they are all Hibernate ORM and validator, all the micro profile is inside. So for me, it's now Quarkus very much like a Java experience, right? Because everything is out of the box. I don't have to add an extension afterwards.
Okay, interesting. Well, as long as you don't have millions of those, so those extensions, that sounds.
In my opinion, it is better at the beginning to include everything, and then you can you are in the flow and can hack like crazy, and then remove things afterwards. Then adding and extensions. So this is what I don't like. It's different mindset. So I this is why I like Java. I just pick everything, and if it's fast enough, I stick with it. So this is different.
Yeah, I'm somewhat with you, except, we look at the popularity of things like Spring Boot, and we've got to adapt to what the market perceives is good. Cause that's, you need here we're at like a perfect storm where there is good technology. I think, there is, market conditions that are changing because of the containers and there is Java accepting that and the right technologies, GraalVM and whatnot coming and saying, here is how we could pivot, right? And we mentioned annotation quite in the podcast a bit before. That's the same thing where annotation really created a new energy in Java by having frameworks adapting, frameworks dying, new framework coming up. But it was really a bit of a revolution. And you don't have that many revolutions in Java, but I think that's one of them.
Yeah, absolutely.
Real-time effort.
This is the perfect storm. And
whether it's Quarkus or not, right? It's just, I'm talking generally here.
Yeah, but what I have to say, a strong selling point for me for Quarkus was exactly the same what I did with Glassfish, 10 years ago, because you could buy commercial support for Glassfish, and I assume in one day there will be commercial support for Quarkus from Red Hat. And this is some serious projects. My clients, require me to ship, JBoss with a support model, and I say, okay, you can buy, this is Red Hat. So if you like, you probably can buy support, and this is a completely different story, So the optional commercial support support was for me always a huge selling point, right?
Yeah. Cool.
Yeah.
One last question.
It was the longest episode, but the road to Quarkus is a long one.
I guess I'm old. That's why, I'm older than the average that you interview, maybe.
Yeah, I interviewed James Gosling. He's older, but we will have to split it because we were now, I think, in 1980 or something, or no, beginning of Java where we stopped.
Okay. Yes. Nice.
Yeah.
Okay. So see, the older the person, the longer your episode.
The last long story, because you asked me about Spring Boot and so forth. I can tell you, not many developers are that happy with Spring Boot. So it is larger than or slower than actually perceived. So this is one observation, as not just observation, is what developers are doing. And I was at the JCon conference at a keynote, and I had to deliver a keynote, and me as a keynote, I have no idea what to take. I just coded, and I did. I just picked, I think, Whitefly back then, and just did whatever microservices communicated. And someone asked me what about clouds, and what I knew is that I had Minishift running because of my clients. So I said, okay, I probably can show it, and I just pushed Whitefly to Minishift and just did scale up and down. And so how it worked, and this was, I think, S2I from OpenShift.
Yeah.
And then after the conference, there were 5 young developers with paper and pencil and asked, what was it? I would say, Java, where I can find Java. I was okay, if you would like to have it, it's what's called Whitefly. It's like, this is great. I never saw something fast like this. What you did, what framework are you using? I think, and nothing you saw. It's just Java API, and this was the server. How hard is it to install? And I say, okay, you have just to unzip it. And one student had said, I only had Scala experience, and he coded with me the whole, and he was completely sold. It's like this is amazing what you saw there. And for me, it's like the new wave of developers. They don't know the old stuff, and they're really happy with Java EE. This is sometimes people ask me, why are you doing Java EE? I do because there are a lot of requests here, and with Quarkus even better. And now we can start with Whitefly and move to Quarkus.
Yeah. So do you think Jakarta EE might be the way to sort of reset that so that people come with less preconception?
Yeah, I think so. It's just, it's just marketing the perception. Jakarta EE, Quarkus, and microprofile. Perfect. Where people can find you? Do you have any references?
I'm on so emmanuelbernard.com is my website. Then you got all the information. But generally just on Twitter, Emmanuel Bernard. I'm everywhere, Emmanuel Bernard. I figured out it's long enough but at least, consistent enough. So GitHub and, Twitter, all of that is here. And I've been touring like crazy, to speak about Quarkus. It's slowing it down a bit, but I'll keep doing it, quite a bit over September, October, and so on. So,
I also will speak a little bit about Quarkus at, J4K, Java for Kubernetes conference next week in Orlando.
Cool. Nice.
Cool. Are you there?
No, I'm not. What am I doing next week? Well,
vacations.
I think I'm on vacation. Yeah, it's like next week is the first, next week is, in 2 weeks. But anyway, it's like a quieter time for me. Well, at least non-travel.
Perfect. So thank you a lot.
All right. Yeah, thank you. I really enjoyed the time. So it was cool.